you think about based on the literature that's available on cluster sets is that we kind of get the feeling that, yeah, we can manipulate the training stimulus, modify the velocity profile, introduce recovery, change the training stimulus. But how do we do it? And this is where we take the science and we have to translate it to an application that will work in the real world, which is the gym that we're going to work in, or the teams that we're going to work in, and try to get a training stimulus. So the questions we have to ask ourselves is, what cluster set types should we use? And when should we use them? You know, one cluster set that's very endurance-oriented may be great in your strength endurance phase, but not great in your peaking or power phase. So we could manipulate the training structures to kind of fit the periodization plan. What exercises should we use in our cluster sets? Most of the cluster studies use weightlifting derivatives. The stuff that we did with James Tufano with his strength endurance modeling was all squat movements, and Oliver used squats. So maybe, you know, we could use large mass exercises in one direction for a stimulus, or we could use power exercises in another direction. What set and repetition schemes could we create to create the cluster sets? We showed very distinct different performance outcomes and physiological ramifications for that depending on how we create those cluster sets. So we have to think about that. How do we manipulate the rest interval to change the training stress? Is it a lot of rest or a little bit of rest, depending on what we're trying to cause as far as the performance outcome? So what types of cluster sets can we create? How do we load it? When do we integrate the cluster sets into our periodized training plan? And then finally, where do various cluster set structures belong in our periodized training plan? So how do we integrate it, and where do they probably belong? So what I've tried to do is take all this literature and sit with coaches that I work with and kind of come up with an idea of how we could actually model this for performance.